The hollow thuds of debris falling on the planet's surface resounded through the halls of the Necron tomb world as the Lord awoke from his slumber. Around him, canoptic spiders and scarab swarms were already busy tending to the awakening tombs, and not wasting any time, he immediately sent out scouting parties to go and check what had awoken him from his slumber. Elsewhere on the planet, the Tyranid Norncreen had crawled out of the remains of her hive ship and used the biomatter to create scouting parties of her own. She was hell-bent on starting her invasion of the system then and there. It was one of the Necron scouting parties that first spotted a Tyranid party, and they decided on ambushing them in the outskirts of an old abandoned Imperial settlement. Both forces set up their lines and prepared for combat. The Necrons had the benefit of fighting on their own planet, yet found themselves at a distinct disadvantage. The scouting party that had spotted and engaged the Tyranids was led by a technomancer, a strong supporting HQ in its own rights, but unable to grant his army access to the much-needed command protocols that could give them an edge over their enemy. The warriors, canoptic spider, and scarabs would have to rely on the Lich Guard to save the day. Across from them, a Turvigon took up position, supported by a group of warriors, termagants, and a Screamer Killer. Although the Necrons had chosen a battlefield that would allow them better defensive positions, they entered the battlefield trying to hide themselves as best they could from the enemy and hold on to the objectives on their side. The Tyranids, on the other hand, chose a more offensive setup, clearly preparing for a pincer attack, assuming their own objective would be secure and ready to pounce on the two midfield objectives. Although the Necrons spotted the Tyranids first, it was the latter that took the initiative. The Turvigon immediately disgorged an additional squad of termagants and rushed her army forward. Making good use of their High Fleet Kraken adaptation, the Tyranids quickly bounded up the board and took firm control of the midfield. The Necrons, however, had stayed out of range, so they could not open fire on them. The Necrons didn't stay in hiding for long, and they quickly responded by moving most of their army up the center and detaching the Lich Guard to secure their right flank. The Necron warriors opened up with their Gauss Flayers and took out nearly half of the advancing Termagants. The Termagants had been a bit overzealous in their bounding advance, and a further 2 fled as the unit was out of synaptic range. The Mama Bug did exactly what she was created to do, and she replenished 5 of the killed Termagants and re-established synaptic control over them. Emboldened by the 20 victory points they got from their own objective and the right midfield objective, the entire army moved up again, with the Termagants encircling the Necron warriors and the Screamer Killer alongside the Tyranid warriors securing the leftmost objective and pouncing on the Lich Guard that were hiding in the ruins. The Turvigon fired her Stinger salvo into the warriors and took out 4 of the Necrons. Appendages crawled over the battlefield as 2 of the never-dead warriors reassembled themselves. Both groups of Termagants fired their flesh borers at the Necron warriors, but finding little flesh to actually bore into. Only a few found their target and only 1 managed to take down one of the warriors. On the other side of the battlefield, the Tyranid warriors let loose on the Lich Guard with their Death Spitters, catching one of them off guard. Not being able to put up his dispersion shield on time, the Lich Guard was cut down. But now properly aware of the enemy assault, the Screamer Killer fared little better with his bioplasmic scream. After having fired all of their weapons, the Tyranids now crashed into their enemy. 2 of the Termagants fell to overwatch from the warriors before slamming into them. The Lich Guard found themselves thoroughly surrounded by the Screamer Killer and the warriors. Ready now to test their skills with Dispersion Shield and Hyperphase Sword, the Lich Guard were set to defend in the ruins and the army's right flank. The Screamer Killer was the first to come crashing through the ruins, and 2 Lich Guard were obliterated by its charge. One of them, luckily for the Necrons, not badly enough to not be able to regenerate itself. Before the warriors could throw themselves into the fray, the remaining Lich Guard launched a counter-offensive, cutting down one of the advancing Tyranid warriors. Bone swords flaying, the warriors triumphantly cut down one of the Lich Guard, but only to watch in bewilderment as the Necron reanimated in front of them. The fight for the ruins was on. In the center of the battlefield, the combat deteriorated into a slugging match, with Necron warriors and Termagants trying to bash each other's heads in with ranged weapons. Neither managed to make any meaningful impact. The metallic Necrons were virtually immune to the Tyranid flesh borer clubs, but the Tyranid exoskeleton proved equally resilient to gauze hammers. Only one Termagant didn't survive the initial attack. Still in control of their own objective, the Necron Technomancer now cashed in 10 victory points, and he was now prepared to turn the battle in his favor. Chanting his rites of reanimation, the Technomancer brought the unit of Necron warriors back up to full strength. With most of his units locked in combat, the Technomancer moved the Canoptek Spider to an elevated position and ordered the Scarabs to scale over the ruins on their left flank to encircle the Termagants and free up his warriors. The Canoptek Spider fired its particle beamer into the onrushing Termagants, but its shots bounced off the Griblies harmlessly. The Scarabs now entered the fray, and with chittering feeder mandibles, they dragged down 5 of the Termagants. The ensuing chaos allowed the Necron warriors to bash in the remaining 3 skulls and claim them for the... Oh, no, wait, wrong army. Across the battlefield, the ruins shook on their foundations as the Screamer Killer and the Tyranid warriors continued duking it out with the Lich Guard. The Lich Guard managed to effectively fend off the Bone Swords with their dispersion shields and even managed to score an additional wound on one of the warriors. The brute force of the Screamer Killer, however, was another matter, and 2 of the Lich Guard were utterly obliterated by its talons. With objective control now at the tipping point, the Tyranids racked up another 20 points, and the hive mind smelled victory. Can a hive mind smell? Well, anyway. With the annihilation of the Lich Guard now virtually secured, the Screamer Killer managed to free itself from combat and charged into the rear of the remaining Necron, securing the Necron objective as it went. The Necron warriors were emboldened by the victory over the Termagants, but as they looked up, they now stared right down the maw of the Turvagon and the second group of Termagants. The Turvagon lets loose with its stinger salvos on the Scarabs, joined by the flesh borers of the Termagants, and obliterated 2 of the swarms. The Screamer Killer let off its bioplasmic scream as it charged the Technomancer, but it proved entirely ineffective. As the Termagants launched a renewed offensive on the Necron warriors, another 2 were cut down by Overwatch before Bashfest 2022 started all over again. The Turvagon threw itself into the Canoptek Spider and smashed through both the spider and the container it was on, its massive crushing claws doing a whopping 16 wounds to the poor little spider. It gave it a VIP view, though, of the Screamer Killer now tearing the Technomancer apart, with 4 automatic wounds alone already enough to kill the Necron leader. Legend has it that the Hivemind is still wondering how many of the potential 27 wounds would have actually made it through. The Termagants swarmed around their prey in awe of what the big bugs just accomplished, but their fervor changed very little to the impact a blunt hit with a flesh borer has on a metal skeleton. The Necron warriors, on the other hand, managed to beat 6 of the Termagants to bloody pulp, 2 of them getting back up surprisingly, as they apparently feel no pain. The last of the Lich Guards defended bravely against the remaining 2 warriors, but the flurry of bone swords was simply too much for the lone warrior, and he was finally struck down. Now completely by themselves and surrounded, the Necron warriors could do little else than just stand and fight. The extra buff from the catalyst the Turvagon finally managed to cast had made the Termagants a bit more resilient, and only 2 perished during the fighting. With only 1 unit of Necron warriors and 1 Scarab swarm left and all objectives now secured, the Tyranids threw everything they had at their enemy. The Turvagon attempted to smite the warriors, but the 2 that he managed to crush simply got back up again. The Turvagon then decided to just leave the Necron warriors for the Screamer Killer and focused its attention on the Scarab swarm. A 15 wound attack made short work of them. The Screamer Killer managed to take out 5 of the Necron warriors, but again 1 managed to return to the battle. The Termagants wanted to make themselves count amongst the monsters and bashed in 1 of the Necrons, but yet again it got up immediately. This set the stage for a never-ending slugging match of kills and reanimations. With a final score of 100 points for the Tyranids versus 10 points on the Necron side, the Tyranids clearly won the day. The gained experience made their army even more formidable, and the Tyranid hive mind decided to push on in search for more deposits of biomatter. The Necrons, in the meantime, returned to their tomb world to prepare new and powerful units to counter the now found Tyranid threat. But as both armies moved away from the battlefield, the troubled skies above them split as a new army joined the fray.